In terms of professional wrestling, the names, the Guerrero family in El Paso obviously is legendary, from Salvador Gory Guerrero all the way through his kids, his grandkids, and just the whole family. The legacy is amazing. Chavo Guerrero Sr. Had been a longtime friend of the station for years. He passed away tragically years ago, but his memoir, Instant Classic, is now published and it is available to purchase via Amazon. Kirk Buchner wrote the book along with Chavo Sr., and he joins us live via Zoom here on Sports Talk. Hey, great to have you, Kirk, and congratulations on the book with Chavo Sr. I was so excited when I heard the news that this had become a reality.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming to finally get this out there. My only regret is that obviously Chavo didn't get to see this in book form. He was with it from beginning to end, but it was so important for him to, because he's such an old school, and Classic was such a great name for him. So for him, it was all about the book, the feel, and I wish he would have got to see it. I'm sure in some way he is.
Absolutely right. Now, you run a website that is called notinhallofame.com. What's ironic about this website is that it took me 5 or 6 tries to get Gory Guerrero into the El Paso Athletic Hall of Fame. And we were able to do that here this year. The ceremony was great. His family was there for it, and it couldn't have been any better. So that was really a lot of fun for us. But in the process, I can relate to Not in Hall of Fame, because that was the story of the Guerreros here in El Paso. And now that's no longer the case. But I love the website. I love the concept. And obviously for you, sports, including pro wrestling, is a big part of it.
Yes, very much so. Music. Actually, we just launched a section for those who are not in the Country Music Hall of Fame. So, because that's really the core thing. And then it sort of morphed into just creating our own halls.
How did you get to first meet and get to know Chavo Sr. and deciding that he wanted to put, his life story together?
Well, I reached out to Chavo just you just try and get as much content you can for a website. So I sent out messages to people, hey, can I interview you? And Classic was down for that. 2 weeks after I did that, he reached out and said, can you help me out with something? Like, yeah. And so he asked me to help him with his book. And so I flew out. He was living in Bandera at the time. So I flew out to Texas to meet up with him, just because this was sort of a daunting task. And I wanted to try and get a feel of not just his story, but like who he is and how he wanted to tell it. And I kind of knew that it was the right thing to do, because I'm flying out from Toronto, where I was living at the time. Yeah. And so going through through immigration at the airport before I even leave. So I asked him, why are you going to the United States? And I said, I'm going to meet Chavo Guerrero Sr. The guy held me in line for 2 minutes just to talk about his memories of watching him in San Antonio.
Wow. That's awesome.
If I thought, like, if I'm not meant to do this, this is certainly a sign from whatever God we believe in.
Kirk Buchner with us here on the show as we continue. The name of the book, Instant Classic, from Chavo Guerrero Sr., along with Kirk Buchner here on the program. What's interesting to me is when you read, when you open up the book, the first thing you get to see, Kirk, is the first preface, and there were 3 of them, but the first one was from Roddy Piper. And ironically, Roddy, has been also gone for a while, which kind of gives you an idea of how long this project really was in the works. And, listening to how he described just the person that Chavo was, especially how instrumental he was as Piper was getting into the pro wrestling business. It was such a great lead-in to Chavo's story.
Yeah, it is. I had, I guess as wrestling fans call it, your mark out moment, when I was with him in Texas and he called Roddy to do it, to ask him for that. And he played for me the message he got back, and just hearing, because I was a Roddy Piper fan, like that was my guy. As a kid, like in Toronto, like it was only WWF television at the time, then named WWF at the time, in that area. So like for me, like that was I was trying not to let it show so much. Actually, what you haven't seen, because I know you've seen the manuscript before. There's actually now a fourth, because there was three forewords, one by Roddy, one by Bill Watts, and another by one of his students. Through the person who actually helped me get it to the next level, a gentleman named Kenny Casanova, who has helped, about 14 other wrestlers see this dream come through. He arranged, which is so ironic for one of his people that he didn't always get along with, to do another forward. Conan actually has a forward in this now.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. And Conan, one of the more, I wouldn't say recent wrestlers, but he wrestled within the last 20, 25 years and still is active today on some of the indie circuits. So a lot of people can relate to Conan when they hear that name. Yeah,
it's really interesting too, because they actually had a Twitter feud going on. They didn't get along in later days, but they did reconcile through Junior when he was competing in Lucha Underground, I believe. And Conan, even through all the stuff that when they were at their wits' end, I suppose, with each other, Conan always said how much that Chavo was the first guy that he noticed when he was growing up in Florida.
Wow. Well, I'll say this, as I, think about the story itself and the fact that now fans around here in El Paso can purchase Instant Classic on Amazon and get to read the story out of that Chavo told about his career. The one thing I always gathered was the Guerrero wrestling family was pretty tight. The brothers were all involved, from Gory as a promoter, and then the sons were wrestling. The daughters were involved in the promotion. They would help work the gate and coordinate things. It was a family affair and a family business, and that's the kind of life that Chavo Sr. grew up in.
Yeah, it was. It's really a fascinating life story that he gave, because often I think when people in his position open up, they're, how do I say this? I guess manipulating the truth or softening the truth. Chavo was a very proud man, but he let his demons out, for this book. So you read everything, the good, the bad, the partying. He's open about why he got let go from a lot of places, and how in many cases he would say it. He was his own worst enemy. But I think, and you got to know him, so I think the biggest thing that he was so more proud of was his last name, being a Guerrero. That meant more to him than I think anything else to him in life.
Not to mention the impact he had in Los Angeles. People need to understand that when he was in LA and really headlining some of the shows during the heyday in the 70s and even you could say into the early 80s, he was a big deal. And, he was able to get the fans that just came out to see him. That was the kind of power that the Chavo Guerrero Sr. had in those days.
He did. I wasn't even aware of how big he was in that area. And like one story that's sort of in the book, when he was in LA, and as he was telling me this, and I said, like, because he was in that movie with Henry Winkler. It didn't do particularly well, but The One and Only, which was a wrestling film where Winkler goes into the wrestling industry set in the 50s. And that was during Winkler's heyday as the Fonz. And in that movie, the first person he wrestles is Chavo. And Chavo's portraying a character named Indian Joe, and all he does is grunt. And in the movie, the only person who beats up Henry Winkler is Chavo. And I said, like, you realize you're the coolest man of the 70s. You're the only one who the Fonz did their job for.
I love that. Was it difficult to get Chavo to open up when he was really starting to put his life story into words?
No, it wasn't hard to get him to open up. It was, I think, a little hard for him once he saw everything that we were working together. Like, do we keep this in? So he didn't have a problem opening up to me, and really, we didn't cut anything out. So no, he didn't really have a problem with it. When I first interviewed him for the website, he did. And then he asked me to remove a few things, which I did. And I think that's probably how I earned his trust.
Kirk, it's interesting too, because the story he tells, the fact is, wrestling was so different when he was really headlining the shows compared to the way it is now. It was all territorial based then. You did not have a monster conglomerate like you do now with the WWE and even AEW to some extent, because those are clearly the two largest. Back in those days, you traveled across the country, but it was a tight-knit group of guys. Everybody knew each other, and ultimately it was all about playing to the fans.
Yeah, very much so. Just the love he had for some of the other wrestlers in the industry. Terry Funk, I don't think you ever read anyone who says anything bad about him. Andre the Giant. So we had a whole chapter just dedicated to his friendship with Andre. Because you don't think of Andre's friend circle and you don't think of Chavo, but they were really good friends. So just some of the big names, and then some of the names he didn't get along with. I guess I can say because it's in the book. Tully Blanchard, for example, Ole Anderson. He wasn't certainly enamored with that individual.
Again, if you want to read more about it and get to see and understand why Chavo felt that way, he did about everybody, Instant Classic is the name of the book, available right now on paperback from Kirk Buchner, who's with us here on Sports Talk. Now, this book was published about 6 weeks ago. I understand it's doing very, very well. So congratulations, congratulations on that.
Thanks so much. It turned into be like, this was his lifelong dream, and I feel like it became mine too.
What do you think my listeners in El Paso, especially those that are familiar with Chavo, the Guerrero family, professional wrestling, what do you think they will enjoy the most about this book once they get the opportunity to read it, Kirk?
I think there's actually a pre-wrestling story that's in there. Chavo's early jobs before he went into pro wrestling full-time was as a wrestling teacher in El Paso. And there's a great sort of, it's like a Disney movie, a Disney sports movie, where he took over a team that didn't win a meet all year before he got there. Didn't do well the first year, went like 500 the second year. And then in the third year, they won city, and his star pupil or star student had to beat his own brother.
Oh, wow.
Somehow that I just sort of see that as a sports film. I mean, there's the Kurt Warner film coming out. I think this is almost like Stand and Deliver meets Lean on Me, because there's also great stories there where Chavo, I mean, but different time then, he put one of the teachers in a locker. Because
Could you see this turning eventually into some kind of movie? Do you think it's the kind of story that would make a really good movie?
That chapter would. Yeah, absolutely it would. Absolutely. I told him if that ever happened, I thought I would personally play great as the idiot principal we dealt with, but that's just.
I'm excited for you.
Get myself in the film.
I'm excited for the fans to get a chance to pick up an Instant Classic, read it for themselves, and really enjoy the life of Chavo Guerrero Sr., which is what it's all about here in El Paso. Kirk, thanks again for the time. Appreciate you joining us, and really enjoyed some of the stories you shared on the show today.
Thank you very much for having me on. It's been an honor.